My guest is a Fulbright scholar. He is an educationist, he's a scientist, and he once worked with the district assembly in Dangwe West, so it's fair to call him a politician who has been engaged with local governance. Tonight, Professor Jerome Djangmah is my guest on the show, and we will walk him through his life. And of course, he cherishes being an old boy of Presbyterian Secondary School. He's an Odadie. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Personality Friday. Now, you can join us on the show on our Facebook, facebook.com/multi-TV Ghana, and by text 1760. So, Professor Djangmah, who is Professor Jerome Djangmah?
Yes, thank you. I would say that I'm a retired professor from the University of Ghana, where I was the head of the Department of Zoology for at least 6 years. Before then, I had been the Director General of the Ghana Education Service for 2 years. Before going to GES, the Ghana Education Service, I was head of the Department of Zoology at the University of Cape Coast, where I also became the Pro-Vice Chancellor, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, sort of. If there is any position that I should mention at this moment, between 2006 and 2009, I occupied my last, my last public office. I was the chairman of the West African Exams Council, 2006 and 2009. So now I'm in complete retirement.
So take us through your schooling days, from basic school and the kind of family structure you grew in during that time.
Yes, I attended school in my small town, New Ningo. Ningo is in the news.
Now, yes.
I was in primary school there for 6 years. After that, I went to Adesso. Adesso is a small town, commercial town, in the 1950s, very close to Nsawan. I did 1 year school.
So was this because your parents moved, or because your parents thought that going to school in Adesso to continue was the right thing for you?
Yes. My father's life was very interesting. My father was a migrant cocoa farmer. I'm sure you must have heard of these cocoa farmers who migrated from Akwaping, Krobo, Shai, Accra, and so on.
Yeah.
You know, who went to the forest areas and set up, you know, cocoa farms and so on. They normally use, you know, migrant labor. They themselves were no farmers, you know. So he had a farm, you know, he had many farms around, you know, Nsawan and Adesso, you know. So he had a family, he had a home there, you know. So after school at Ningo, we went there. I went there with a brother and so on. So I stayed in Adesso for just about a year, you know. You want me to say more about my school?
No, I mean, from Adesso, then it means that your basic school was wrapping up, and then secondary school came in.
Yes. Secondary school came in when I moved with a brother of mine to Accra. We attended a small school in Accra called St. Andrew's Secondary School, or St. Andrew's College.
This
was,
school,
you know, in 52, 53.
Does it still exist now?
It doesn't exist. That school doesn't exist anymore. From there, I went to the Presbyterian Secondary School at Odumase Krobo, you know, between 1953 and 1955. That's where I did my O-level in 1955. And then after 55, you know, I did the O-level in 55. Then I had a scholarship to attend my sixth form, you know, to go to the sixth form at St. Augustine's College.
Okay.
So these were the kind of places I moved.
You have great memories of Presec. Tell us about your Presec memories, the outstanding memories of your relationships, your friends in Presec, and how that shaped who you are today.
Yes. Well, Presec, we're talking about Odumase Krobo.
Yeah.
That was Presec at the time.
Yeah.
You know, Presec moved from Odumase Krobo in 1968 to Mile 9, that is Alego now. So when we talk about Odadie, the real Odadie, that's where it is. That is that tree. I don't know whether you have to show it. So I was there in 53. My headmaster was Mr. E.J. Clofio. Later on he became Reverend E.J. Clofio. He was a very good headmaster. You know, some of my teachers were the late, virtually all my teachers must be dead by now.
By now, I
yes.
reckon.
I had a very good physics teacher called Mr. Lomo Jones. You know, Robert Lomo Jones was excellent. My mathematics teacher was one, Mr. Nyakon. Then we had a music teacher, Mr. Geoffrey Boatin. I think he came from Aprede.
Yes.
Maybe a Duke Room, Aprede.
Yeah, I know.
You know.
Yeah.
Well, I was in a very good class. Quite a number of my colleagues now. We have a couple of professors, you know, many lawyers, engineers, diplomats, and so on. So it's a very good school.
So
you know.
is that where your interest in science started, or it started when you went to St. Augustine's College?
No, to go to St. Augustine's to do science, this really means you must have studied science, you know. So I did science, you know, for the O levels.
Yeah, okay.
You know,
yeah,
probably could have done other things, but somehow you were good in mathematics, and the good mathematicians were doing science, so I did science.
But so you say that it came by chance, or it was something that your interest was in? I mean, from pre-sec, when you started studying science, did it come natural to you,
well,
or
it came naturally
you were coerced by family to?
It came naturally to me
if
you were good in mathematics. Okay. You know, the natural thing was to do science. If you were doing science, you wanted to be a doctor or you wanted to be an engineer. At that time, most of us knew very little, you know, about science outside engineering and medicine, you know. Yeah. So I must say that the interest came naturally. And the pre-sec situation is very interesting, you know, because we had only one laboratory, you know, where we did physics, chemistry, and biology. We had only one microscope. You know, these were the conditions under which we studied. But, you know, the teaching was good.
And so, I mean, going through pre-sec and finishing at St. Augustine's, were you then, from then on, certain what really you wanted to do? What exactly were you aspiring to be after all your studies, science studies?
I must say that if you were good in science and you did science those days, you wanted to be an engineer or you wanted to be a doctor, you wanted to do medicine, you know. All those years I wanted to be a doctor, you know, and so in the sixth form I did physics, chemistry, zoology, and botany.
Okay.
There was no medical school at our time, you know, so you had to go through a process of selection. You know, you had to be selected, you know, to do whatever you wanted to do.
And did you enjoy zoology? Because eventually you became a professor of zoology.
Yes,
right?
yes.
You started enjoying this from the early onset and decided that this is where you were going to be.
Yes, not getting the scholarship, you know, to do medicine. Zoology was the next thing I could do. I could have done chemistry, I could have done botany, and so on. So I went into zoology. I had no problem at all with zoology. You know, there was no problem.
Is zoology? I mean, looking back to then, is zoology popular now? And are there prospective young university students who are aspiring to be zoologists like you did?
Yes, I must say that before we went to university, you were doing zoology because you wanted to do medicine. Okay. You know, most Ghanaians would not say they wanted to be zoologists because really we didn't grow up in an environment where, you know, there were zoos.
So there was nothing like biological sciences, which will lead you on to medical school.
And so on. But you see, I got into zoology. I sort of liked it. You know, if you did zoology, you could also study entomology. Entomology is an aspect of, which is a study of say insects. You know, you could do fisheries. You know, with that, you know, you could do other things, a number of other things. So zoology leads to so many other, you know, professional disciplines.
I know that, I mean, from the time you went through secondary school, through university, was a time, you know, Ghana was emerging from the old Gold Coast with Kwame Nkrumah's vision of transforming our country with science and technology. Where did you see yourself in this vision at that time?
Well, we were young people, and all we knew was if you did well, you know, in the sixth form, you went to university. So I got in the University of Ghana in 1958. you know, Ghana, of course, was independent in 1957. So in 1958, I enrolled at the University of Ghana. And it was a very beautiful place. I mean, the environment was super. And you knew that if you graduated, you know, you probably go to teach in a secondary school, or you work in a government department, you know, some such place, you know. So, and at the time, I think life was very good for the university graduates. Virtually everybody who graduated at the time and worked in a government department, maybe about 3 or 4 months after getting to work, you had a car. So life was quite good. You know, some people were trained as became you know, government agents, or we now call them, say, district commissioners at the time. You know, some of our colleagues went into the foreign service. You know, so life was quite good. You know, for university graduates, there was nothing like, you know, unemployed university graduates. Those who went to teach, you know, also had cars, you know, in bungalows and so on. So life was good, you know.
I know you, you as former Director General of the Ghana Education Service was involved in a lot of shaping of the policies and curricula for schools, training, etc. Now, recently in Ghana, there have been concerns about the quality of graduates who are produced from our universities. I want to compare that to your time when you were at university and when you became Director General. How do you compare the skills you acquired going through university and the skill level you see in our young graduates during the time you worked as Director General?
Well, there's a lot of talk about, you know, standards having fallen over the years, you know. A lot of it is, I believe, uninformed, you know, because there are many more students in the university, if like lecture theater now, you know, lots of them, particularly in the arts and social science. In science, the numbers are much larger than they were during our time. I must say that in my final year doing zoology, we were just about 8 students, you know. Now, of course, they probably be about 30, 40. You know, and so the numbers are larger, you know, and therefore there certainly will be problems about inadequate equipment, inadequate biological specimens, and so on. But whatever has happened, I don't think that the differences that people talk about are that significant. You know, they're not significantly different. You know, what we have now compared to what we had, say, in the past. You know, but of course, the educational system has gone through changes. You know, there was no senior secondary, there was no junior secondary school at the time. The junior secondary school at the time would be the middle school. You know, that would be the middle school or the senior school at the time. It was senior school, the middle school. You know, so now the system has changed. You know, from what we used to know. You know. But if you look at the BECE as the equivalent of the common entrance or the equivalent of the middle form 4 exam, you know, students are entering senior high schools virtually about the same level, you know, of competence
and you say
as they were.
Better prepared and more equipped, you know. Would you say that?
No, it's only that the number of years. You see, now the equivalent of the O-level is the West African School Certificate Examination. That's the equivalent of the O-level, you know, and there's no 6th form. So what is equivalent to the 6th form is the first year in the university. I think that's a significant difference. You know, there is the 6th form which doesn't exist. That is the A-level. It doesn't exist, you know. So the West African School Certificate Exam is equivalent to the O-level, you know. So now you did 4 years in the university, when at our time you did 3 years. That's if we're doing just an ordinary degree. You know, 4 years now compared to 3 years, you know, in the past.
Now, Professor Djangmah's education and his career path has taken him through different levels. He was one time Director General of the West Africa Examinations Council, WAEC, and then he was instrumental in He actually was the one who instituted the Science, Technology and Mathematics Education Clinic for girls. And he was also Director General. So we have some pictures of him and we will show for our audience. You can have a look. Right, so Professor Djangmah, do you recognize these images?
Yes, yes. I recognize them.
So these
very much so.
Yeah. So when was this? Or do you remember?
Well, I was
the trigger.
Sitting at the desk of the Director General of the Ghana Education Service at the time. That was in 1986 or 87, thereabouts. Yes.
And then there was the earlier one where you were more like giving a speech.
Yes, I think probably at a speech day.
Was that?
Oh, that is my wife. The wedding. That is on our wedding day. that was some speech day somewhere.
Yeah, you've worked very diligently in education, and do you have fond memories of interaction?
You want to look at this. That is Professor Michael Quay, the Deputy Speaker of Parliament. I was invited to India, you know, and this was at a reception in New Delhi.
And then your wedding day.
Yeah,
we haven't spoken much about your family, wife, and kids.
Yes.
How many years have you been married?
Oh, since 1965. So
wow.
1965. So
and
we've been married for a long time.
For a very long time. And how many kids and grandchildren?
Oh, well, that is a picture of
family party.
Me, my 70th birthday. So you could see that is the big boy there. That's my firstborn. He's a doctor.
Okay.
You know,
is he based in Ghana?
No, he works in London.
Okay.
And that is my wife, of course. And then the middle one, you know, between my wife and I, that is a twin boy.
Okay.
He is called Oko. He lives in Houston, and that is a sister. The sister is called Aquile Suma. And the last one carrying the young girl is Teria. So I've got four kids.
That's great. That's great.
Yes.
And all of them are doing pretty well, I guess. This is
well, they all science graduates.
Wow.
That is
so the science runs in the family. This is a very beautiful family picture.
Yeah, that is a picture
the same group which were in the party.
Yes, that is a picture that was taken in Houston, Texas. We were on a visit last year.
Right. So who are these in the photo?
So of course you see the we have only three of the two of the
gentlemen.
The gentleman on the left, that is Oko, that is Aquile Suma, that is the woman there. Next to her is the husband, and the other lady between my daughter and the twin boy is the twin boy's wife.
Great.
So the 1, 2, 3 are the children of the fair lady there, and then the little boy, that is our last grandchild. That's a picture that was taken in America.
That's very lovely.
Last year.
That's very lovely. Right. So Professor Djangmah, let's now make a transition from these photos to real life, from your time at University of Ghana when you started actual work. Tell us how it all started from university and the opportunities that availed themselves to you and the choices which you made, which eventually got you where you are today.
Yeah, thank you. Well, from university, I was to work as a research assistant, at home in the Volta region. And I reported, and I must say, I didn't like the reception I had. So I made up my mind there and then that I was going to teach in the secondary school.
Okay.
So from home, the following Monday found me at Achimota School, where I sought an interview with the headmaster at the time. The headmaster was a very big man, a very important Ghanaian. The late Mr. David Chapman-Nyaho.
Yeah.
He happened to be the classmate of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, and he was the secretary to the cabinet, Nkrumah's first cabinet. Mr. David Chapman-Nyaho was the cabinet secretary. So, and then he became Ghana's ambassador to the United Nations and Washington, D.C. So he was a headmaster at the time, and he allowed me to talk to him. And I said I wanted a job. I wanted to teach in the school. And he interviewed me a little bit. He said, what could you teach? I said, I could teach Ga, if you like. I could teach mathematics. I could teach science. So he said, come, go get yourself ready and start work on Wednesday. So he really appointed me a teacher on the sports.
I see.
Yeah. At that time, the Ministry of Education had heard that I was available. They wanted some other job for me. But I think this headmaster was so powerful that, his will prevailed. So he gave me the appointment at the Achimota School, and I taught for just 1 year, 1962 to 1963.
So what did you teach?
Yeah, I taught, as I said, I taught mathematics, science, biology, and Ga. These were the subjects that I taught.
And I know in a very short period, 1 year, it could be difficult for you to remember some of your students, but are there some popular students today you remember who were in your class? Well, the number of very prominent people they were not necessarily in my class, they were in the school at the time. Jerry Rollins was in Form 2. Okay.
You
didn't teach Rollins?
I taught his class just for 1 period.
Okay.
But then his wife was in the class I taught regularly for the year.
I see.
So the first lady then, that is Nana Konedu, was in Form 2A. I taught that class.
Okay.
Then Reverend Dr. Joyce Ayi was in Form 5. I taught her biology in Form 5.
Yes.
The current president of Ghana, that is His Excellency John Evans Atamirus, was, I think, in Upper 6. He did also. I didn't know him, but he was in the school at the time. There was Kwame Pepra was in the school at the time. Quite a number. So quite a number of them, people who are in public life. I knew them.
Are you in touch with these people? I mean,
well, occasionally.
Okay.
I think occasionally, I've met quite a number of them, since. But I was there for just 1 year, and because they're prominent, you remember them.
And then so how long did it take you then from all this to make the decision to go for further education, which you did? Tell us about postgraduate education.
That came when I joined the University College of Cape Coast at the time. University College of Cape Coast started the year before. It started early in 1962. And I was appointed an assistant lecturer in zoology in August 1963.
I see.
I taught there as an assistant lecturer for 2 years. And then I won a Commonwealth Academic Fellowship, which took me to Bangor in North Wales, University College of Bangor, Wales. University College of North Wales, Bangor. That is where I did my PhD for 3 years in marine biology. So I must say it was Cape Coast, that really gave me the opportunity. It was a new university. It was employing young people and sending them away to study, to get higher qualification.
So when you went to Bangor, was there the temptation not to return to Ghana? I know there've been talk about brain drain and everything. In your time, was there the temptation of not coming back? There was no such temptation at all. It didn't exist at my time. It didn't exist at my time. In terms of resources to study, I think the resources were as good as could be. I was a Commonwealth scholar, and I was also on study leave, so I had no problem
at all, you know, with money, and the temptation to stay didn't exist. So most of us at that time, the moment we graduated, we decided to return.
You come back to your jobs, or
yes.
you come back to look for a new job?
No, I was on study leave.
Okay.
So there was a job waiting for me, you know. So there was no temptation at all. I must say that in my generation, practically everybody who was sent away returned. You know, the graduates, they also, Ghanaians who obtained higher degrees didn't stay. They returned promptly. So we're talking about the mid-60s. That is the mid-60s, yes.
And life in Bangor, how did, I know when we travel abroad, we get a lot of influences shaping what we want to do back home and etc. Life in Bangor, how did that influence you and what you came back to do? I mean, what did you bring from Bangor, which you cherish? Well,
there's something very significant. I went with my wife to Bangor because we got married in '65 and we left together, you know, childless. We returned with 3 children.
Wow.
You know, the big boy and then the twins. And we returned very well prepared. You know, we were able to acquire a car, for example, you know, adequate, you know, if you like, you know, household equipment and so on. And there was not even the need at the time for anybody to be returning wanting to bring a fridge or television and all that. You could buy all those things in Ghana at the time, you know. But Bangor was a university town. It is still a university town.
Yeah.
The foreign students had a good time, you know. I mean, the people saw us as temporary residents. We were no threat to them. They sort of liked us, you know. So Bangor was a very nice place, fairly rural. So if you come from Ghana, Bangor will not
be exciting. I mean, I studied and lived in Cardiff myself, and I didn't like the idea of Bangor and Lampeta and Swansea. They look far away towns for me. So did you enjoy living there?
We enjoyed it very much.
You did?
We enjoyed it very much. We live on an island called Anglesey.
Anglesey.
You know, Anglesey. And, you know, it's very rural. You heard about Carnarvon. That is in Bangor. And really, the distance from where I live on the island to my laboratory was just about some 15 minutes drive. So we enjoyed it very much.
So how old were your kids when you returned home?
Well, I must say that at the time we came back, we had 3 children. They were all under 3.
Okay. You know, that must have been a difficult readjustment for you as a family. I mean, coming back to work. And so what did your wife do? I mean, was your wife also in academia?
You mean when we were in Bangor?
No, when you returned, I mean.
Yeah, she was teaching.
Okay.
She actually looked after the children for some 2-3 years, and then decided to go into teaching, you know. So she went to teach, you know, and eventually she became a tutor in a training college. You heard of Ola Training College.
Ola Training
so she was a tutor in, you know, home science, you know.
Okay, so let's move on and talk about your role in the Ghana Education Service. You've done tremendously in starting the Science, Technology and Mathematics Education Clinic for Girls and other science initiatives which you championed. Tell us about them.
That program. Well, you know, I saw myself as the very first Director General who did science to a very high level, had a PhD in science, university. Then I was a professor already before I got to Ghana Education Service. So I saw myself as somebody who should project science. So I instituted a neuroscience programs, you know, particularly the Science, Technology and Mathematics Education Clinic for Girls. I realized, I knew that before, but I realized that I had an opportunity to encourage, you know, more girls into science and technology. There were a few of them at the time. So I attended a conference, you know, which focused on what they call gender stereotyping, you know, that kind of perception that you know, girls should do arts and not science. But I came across very bright girls. And so what we tried to do was to organize a workshop. First of all, it was a 2-week workshop, and we assembled some of the brightest girls that you could get. You know, they were selected by their schools. There were 120 of them. You know, we sort of boarded them at Achimota School, and we exposed them to successful women in science and technology. So I identified a number of Ghanaian women who were, you know, already practicing science and technology. In fact, we came across one lady who was in charge of the radar, you know, at the airport. She happened to be a Mrs. Obin. She was an electrical engineer who was in charge of the radar. Then we had a lady, the first Ghanaian woman PhD in physics. And she happened to be a nuclear physicist at the time. She is now Professor Abba Andam. You know, she became a professor of physics at the UST. You know, she was in, I use her as a role model. Then currently Professor Rama Adi. She happened to be a biochemist. So we exposed these young girls who, before they got to the clinic, they were only interested in medicine. That was all that they knew. You know, but after 2 weeks exposure, about only the number that wanted to do medicine was only 40%. They wanted to be biochemists, statisticians, mathematicians, physicists, chemists, and so on. So the program was very good for them, you know. And when I left the Ghana Education Service, just after 2 years, the program continued. You know, they even extended it into, you know, junior secondary schools. And it has made a huge impact, you know, in the admission of women into science and technology.
And how do you feel now, looking back at these innovative ideas which you brought into the education of science, science education for girls? How do you feel now seeing the increasing number of women that are going into very, very scientific fields?
Oh, I feel very proud about it. I feel very proud, good about it. I mean, I attended a number of conferences, or you went somewhere, and a lady will come and tell you that, oh, I am an engineer. I attended the very first clinic in science, technology, and mathematics education for girls. So it really made an impact. And I think now if you go to the University of Science and Technology, you go to engineering department, and you find quite a number of you know, women who are lecturers, you know, and the enrollment of women is quite substantial.
Well, you're watching PM Express, and we have a couple of your messages, those of you who are keeping in touch with us on facebook.com/multi-TV Ghana. Fidelis Teo Stranger says, Professor, may God bless you with your good work. All the best. And Saka Fuzo says, Mr. Jerome, I think you are more than qualified, judging from your working experience. We need people like you to help our dear nation Ghana, because from the look of things, the country is in a deplorable state. I pray you will be giving the necessary support. God bless you. God bless Ghana. And Walter Dino says, Professor, God bless you. You help better Ghana education, because you're key in life, because your key in life is education, and Ghana still needs you. God bless you and your family, and add more years to your age. Stay tight and good, Professor. Then Imoro Tahiru Wahamson says, congrats, Professor Jerome, because after 50 years of independence, Ghana is struggling to get requisite expertise like yours. But, well, God bless you, Professor. And then Constant Tobacco says, Professor, I'm happy for you. After pension, you still look young. That's nice. And then God bless you, Ghana. We need more people like you. Isaac Macon says, may you live long to serve as a role model and to the youth of our dear nation, Ghana. Edward Osei Bonso says, I wish to achieve the level you have attained for yourselves and more. God bless you, Professor, for the good works you're rendering for the nation. And Gabriel Nana Amponsa Hazel says, God bless him and may he live long. We'll take a short commercial break, and when we return, we'll ask Professor Djangmah his advice for aspiring young graduates when it comes to making choices in the careers of our viewers made a comment which I want to read through. He says, "Congratulations, Professor Jerome, because after 50 years of independence, Ghana is struggling to get requisite expertise like yours." Do you agree with this assertion that your level of expertise, 50 years on, we're lacking or we're lagging behind in the quality of scientific expertise among our citizens?
Well, it is possible to say two things, you know. We have very qualified people in Ghana, highly qualified people in Ghana. You know, there is no doubt about that. You know, the fact that we can have a cardiothoracic surgery done in Ghana really tells you the distance that we have traveled. Yeah. You know, the medical school didn't exist at my time, but we have a very successful medical school. Ghanaians did it themselves. That is something for us to congratulate ourselves about. Yes. I think that's a good thing. You know, but of course the brain's drain, you know, has taken lots of very good Ghanaians also out of Ghana. So there are a lot of Ghanaian scientists and engineers and doctors, you know, particularly in the US, you know, and Europe and so on. And I think rather than feeling sorry for ourselves, what we should do is to have programs that will bring them in, you know, back into the country, you know, on from time to time, you know, to participate, you know, where their expertise actually lie. Because I can see a stream of Ghanaian professors who come in on a yearly basis to help with teaching in the universities of Ghana. You know, it is said that there are many more Ghanaian doctors in New York than the whole of Ghana. You know, so I think what we have to do is to do what other countries have done. Other countries have really made use of the diaspora, that is, the experts in the diaspora. We can do the same.
Now, you work with West Africa Examinations Council. You were once Director General of the Ghana Education Service. What is your take on the educational reforms we have experienced in the past 10 years, and how do you think that is impacting on the quality of graduates we're getting?
Yes, you see, the West African Exams Council has ensured that standards have not deteriorated at all. Now they have many more, you know, candidates than we used to have. Of course, that is something for us to feel, you know. But you see, what has also happened in our educational system is that we now appear to have a huge gulf, you know, in the standards of teaching in the fee-paying schools, you know, vis-a-vis the public schools. So our problem is how to fix the public schools, and I think that is should be a priority. And how should we be fixing our public schools? I mean, many people are choosing privately funded schools to public schools because they think that they don't get the quality of education for their kids in public schools. Well, I must say that the number one problem is supervision. You know, supervision. You know, supervision in the public schools is not as good as what you have in, you know, schools that are smaller. Sometimes they are owned. You know, the heads of the schools themselves are the proprietors and so on. You know, but then we have the problem, you know, as the numbers increase, you know, we find that we don't have enough qualified teachers to go around. So recently, the number of untrained teachers, you know, appears to be, you know, getting higher than the number of trained teachers. I mean, these are problems. I would just say, call them challenges. You know, they are challenges. And then, because we want to increase enrollment of children in school, strictly you want all children in school. I mean, that is a national, you know, kind of objective. So what you have done is that the capitation grant means that you've taken some money that should be buying, you should use in books, are going school feeding, taking money away from the core academic functions and so on. You know, so I look at all this as problems, you know, as challenges which have to be addressed. That we owe it to our country to make sure that it doesn't matter the school you attend. If you're bright, you're bright. You know, the school you attend should not make that difference. Now, it appears to be making a huge difference. You know?
But I also have concerns that as the local governance, as we become successful with local governance administration, you were an assembly presiding member for the Dangwe West District Assembly. Should resolving educational challenges be the responsibility of the central government, or it should be the responsibility of the local governance administrations?
Yeah, I'm very happy that you mentioned it. I'm a strong believer in the decentralization move. You know, you see, the current Education Act says that the control and management of schools should go to the district assemblies. And I think that is really where we can solve that problem. That is, the problem is huge. We chop it into 200 bits. That's 200 district assemblies or whatever. You know, if we work harder at that level, so that the Ghana Education Service really becomes monitoring from the top. But the real work of ensuring that there is quality, you know, should take place at the district assembly level. So I also feel that way, that really the key to our success is making the district assembly, you know, if you like, management of schools work. District assemblies have got lots of partners. All the community NGOs and the civil society organizations, the churches and so on, can work at the district level, you know, to make the schools function. I think that is a national assignment.
Would you say that the district assemblies, would you say decentralization is yielding the expected results?
Well, everywhere there will be challenges. You know, everywhere there will be challenges. But you see, the district assemblies now are not the local authorities that we had, you know, in Nkrumah's time. Every district assembly receives what is called a district assembly's common fund. You know that one.
Yes.
There's a district assembly fund, you know, which is shared among the district assemblies. Then they have their internally generated funds, what is called the IGF. Then there is a GET fund. You know, what is required now is a program of getting the district assembly, you know, schools to work at the district level. I think that's really where the solution lies. You know, I don't give up at all, you know, but it's certainly, at the moment, it's a huge challenge. But the gap that we see is too huge. You know.
And Professor Djangmah, finally, Edward Osebonso, he says that, I wish to achieve the level that you have attained for yourself and more. What is your advice to young people who are aspiring to be scientists, both men and women?
Well, I don't look at myself as peculiar at all. I look at myself as just one of the people who went to school and worked hard and had supportive parents. You know, there are so many Ghanaians. There are so many Ghanaians like me. There is nothing particularly unique, you know, about success. I think opportunities come people's way, and they should work at it. But I want, you know, our country to do a little bit more. You know, in some countries, we know our, you know, museums. You know, that's one of the areas that I've been very keen about. We started building a science museum in Ghana since 1965. We'll not be able to complete it. You know, people think that, you know, all you need is teachers in class and so on. If you go abroad, I mean, you were abroad, what you learn when you get into a museum, I think that, you know, it is something that we should work at. So that every regional capital, for example, has a science and technology museum. You know, that will help, you know, the young people who are coming, you know, the young people coming up who really want to do science, technology, and so they need that kind of exposure. You know.
Thank you very much, Professor Djangmah, and great ideas.